Hello, I'm Lucy Elliott-Darling, she, her, and this is my Halo Infinite level Banished escape, built using the game's Forge toolset. The production of this project was a sole effort. I designed the level and programmed and designed the gameplay and some game mechanics. More on that later. My goal was to produce a level that would sit comfortably within the second half of a Halo campaign, providing a difficult but fair experience that would challenge the player, pushing them to use their acquired knowledge of the game's sandbox to prevail. Halo has always had a strong narrative focus. Events in the story heavily impact the gameplay and level design, and I wanted to involve that in my level. The narrative synopsis that I had constructed for this would become a core pillar of the design, informing the types of encounters and the spaces that the player would be fighting within. I began concepting the level by thinking about the 3 words I would want the player to describe it as after they'd beaten it, and used those words as the guiding principle for designing the level space and encounters. Those words were intense, exciting, and rewarding. I expanded on how to achieve those goals by considering the sorts of encounters and events that would fall under one or more of these terms. I also used these terms to form the core game loop of the level. Each encounter starts intense. The player is always put on the back foot, be it through numbers, weapons, or map control. It becomes exciting when the player begins to succeed, rewarding them when the player takes the enemy's advantage for themselves. The threat to the player is then escalated to put them back at a disadvantage and bring back the intense feeling of being outgunned. The weapons available to the player was a key consideration throughout the whole level. I always wanted the player to earn their power, so each encounter is carefully tuned to challenge the player with their loadout. Using this, I was also able to move the players into the map by providing the enemies with stronger, more useful weapons. This was also aided by the narrative theme of the level. Drop pods are scattered throughout the map, with dead marines and weapons always nearby. This is visible from the very start and remains constant throughout, pulling the player into the fun zone by encouraging them into dangerous map positions for rewards. The intensity of each encounter was delivered by always giving the player one more thing than they can handle. This was difficult to always get right. Each encounter went through a lot of iteration to ensure that the challenge was fair. This would be anything from changing the environment, altering routes and cover opportunities, to reconfiguring enemies by changing their ranks, number, or weapons. Being careful with the latter, so as not to disrupt the challenge set out in the next encounter by providing the player with a powerful weapon too soon. This encounter, like many others in the level, is designed for engagement. I really wanted to make the player think to succeed, and so weapons, enemies, and cover are laid out like a puzzle. Snipers holding the high ground pose the immediate threat, pinning the player down as they are ill-equipped to fight at range. The snipers are flanked by a moderate number of grunts that will defend the zone around them. Upon a podium stand 2 jackals equipped for short, medium-ranged engagements that will stand their ground with strong shields. Their location makes them difficult to dispatch, as the podium is specifically designed to make standard grenade throws difficult, encouraging the player to find other ways to remove them as a threat. As the player approaches, 2 drop pods descend carrying brute berserkers, a fast, strong, and deadly pressure unit that will force them to keep moving. The player must dispatch these quickly, being mindful of their surroundings as cover is limited and the snipers will punish the player for not respecting them. The player can then push forward into cover and acquire some helpful weaponry. Any further in puts the player within the movement zone with the grunts and within effective range of the shield jackals, which also introduces the one more thing of the second wave. The player must manage the grunts whilst limiting exposure to the jackals, all the while being mindful of the last sniper, which has been positioned to be out of the player's sightlines until they enter this space. The solution to the puzzle intertwined with the challenge. I should kill this enemy to get that gun to kill that enemy. If the player is thinking and winning, then they should walk out of an encounter rewarded for feeling like they accomplished something. This encounter went through a lot of revision as the level was being developed. I've made a separate video detailing its progress if you'd like to explore more. With Infinite's Forge being built upon the multiplayer suite, it does not include functionality for checkpoints or advanced spawning conditions for enemy AI. For my level to have parity with the campaign experience, I used Forge's node scripting system to program in checkpoints, so that the player starts a failed encounter again with the weapons they entered it with. I also created advanced spawn scripts that would automatically trigger new enemy spawns when only X amount of the current encounter remains, and I configured the player's equipment to automatically replenish itself upon use. And I added a feature from previous Halo titles where dwindling enemy numbers would be marked if the player has not killed any for a length of time. although not identical, I was able to achieve a close to parity campaign experience using the nodes available within the scripting tools. This has been a quick overview of the development of my level. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I'd be very excited to share more detail about the project and go further in depth into its production.